This is a story about what I think Britain does best, high value specialist engineering in a niche area. This is about a company that's been going for about 30 years and has become, in the last 5 years, one of the foremost testing companies in the world. What's coming next is a video, hopefully to explain some of the products, and at the end of it we can talk a bit about the business. Okay, I'm going to talk over this so you understand what it is. So, two of our products are split into two ways. We've got track testing and lab testing. Lab testing is large bits of kit like this, and I can guarantee that any of you who actually drive a car or use a car, their car would have been tested at some time by a machine like this. This particular machine was bought by Myra up in the UK. It's their second machine, having bought the first machine back in 1997. And that machine is still in regular use today, and in fact all the Formula One teams use it regularly to produce their cars. This is quite an important machine because this will tell you everything that is wrong with your car and everything that is right with your car. There is no excuse to any car company who has one of these machines to ever make a crap car. It doesn't stop them from making a crap car, but there shouldn't be any excuse. The other part of our business is what we call the track testing equipment, and these are smaller bits of equipment that actually can drive cars autonomously. We've been doing driverless cars for 10 years. This is a particular application is used by the German army. Very hard to persuade a soldier to get in there and drive it for 2 hours, so the robot does it for him. This will do it time in, time out. The important thing about this is that this can repeat the same maneuver time and time again. So if you're involved in a tender, for example, you can guarantee that your car was tested in the same way. A more recent introduction to the company's portfolio is a partnership that we've done with Williams Advanced Engineering, and it's a future project, but it's about simulation and simulators. Much more of the car development is done on the computer, and it comes to a point where the car then has to be taken and put to prototype. At that point, the driver can get in and drive the car. Wouldn't it be nice if the driver could get in at an earlier stage and actually drive the car as a model? And that's where the simulator comes in. It's been used by the Formula One companies for many years. They use it to help them to develop the next chassis platforms because they're restricted on the amount of testing they're allowed to do. Traditional hexapod systems you may see used by British Airways don't work in this application. Everything is very, very close. Everything is in sharp relief. We are talking about 3D video, highly rendered. This is not a video, this is actually a computer rendered image of the roads around Jaguar. Very, very dynamic platform. You kind of really think you're there. The finished product will have a canopy over the top of it, but can actually simulate anything you want to do. This is me driving to work in the morning. This is me driving around a Swedish lake. The beauty is that the robot can do anything a test driver can do, and it can repeat it to within 2 centimetre accuracy. So here's a good example of a robot being put to work on a frozen lake in Sweden, and it's even putting in all the opposite locks that the driver did before to a great degree of accuracy. So what? Well, if you wanted to evaluate things like snow tyres, it's all very well the test driver coming back and saying that was a good car. The robot will tell you why it was a good car, why the chassis was working like it is. There's this huge amount of data that's generated by these machines. Driverless cars, well, they're going to have to be tested somehow. And it's again, you're talking about very dangerous driving conditions, and this is where the soft target cars have come in, and this now represents about 30% of the company's revenue. So, who are we? AB Dynamics stands for Anthony Best Dynamics, and was formed way back in 1982 by Tony Best. We're based in the metropolis of Bradford-on-Avon, down here in the West Country. I joined the company in 2012, and in 2013 we listed onto AIM. And 95% of what we make and what we produce, we export. And we can say that the R&D departments and divisions of all the companies around the world routinely use our products to make cars that are safer and more pleasing to drive. What we do is quite a different thing. We produce technology that is based on mechanical, electrical, electronics and software. All of that is in-house inside the company. And if you got those four things together, you can make the products that we make. We can improve steering dynamics, brakes, suspension. We can look at the advanced safety systems. Advanced safety systems are the prelude to the full driverless technology we think we might be using in a few years' time. More importantly, the computer vehicle models that are generated using data that is brought in by our test machines. And ultimately, driverless car technology has to be tested, and it has to be tested safely. Actually, what we really do is that we actually deploy IP incredibly effectively. Our turnover is about £250,000 per head. That shows you're sweating an asset. That shows you that you've got a company with IP and know-how. And basically what we do, the why we do it, is we are there to make our customers design cars that are safer, more pleasing to drive, and also allow them to make that differential between the competitor. Quite often, car sales come down to a car magazine article where they're comparing an Audi with a BMW, with a Mercedes, and there'll be a comment in there that says, this car feels more dynamic. And that's enough to actually generate millions of pounds worth of more sales. So the car companies are investing in technology every single day to get that incremental improvement over and above the competitor. I said before, our capabilities, you've got to align mechanical, electronics and software. The company has come much more software in the last few years, but we haven't forgotten our mechanical roots. Every product that we make starts with a mechanical design. Every system that we put together has an electronic and electrical component, and the software brings it to life. The software is what keeps it fresh. Many of the technologies that we actually produce, or some of the new products that we produce, are based on the old hardware, but we repackage with the new electronics and software. And the way the products have evolved is that there is a synergy of solutions that we can now provide to the customer. In essence, we can validate the car on the track using the robots. We can measure the actual performance of the car on the actual machines, the SPMM machines, the steering test machines. And what is now happening is that those computer models are now being created to such an extent that actually we can now put the driver back in the loop and he can drive the car via the simulator. And it's this kind of circle of products that actually has been proving so popular in places like China, which now represent about 22% of our turnover. And in fact, if you go back 3-4 years, China was only 5%. Just shows the rapid growth and the geographical growth of the business. And that growth in the developing world is also driving the growth of spending by the traditional car companies. And in fact, if you look at the top 20 companies in the world who spend by R&D, 6 of those companies are car companies. In fact, the number one spender on R&D in the global industry is actually Volkswagen, followed by Ford, GM, Toyota, Honda, and Daimler. So there's a massive amount of money being spent in this area. And in fact, if you look at it as a sector, it's third against healthcare and computing. And if you look at things like you think we might be high in R&D, defence and aerospace, it's actually miles above that. And when we talk about R&D, we talk about everything from GPS to the carpets to the infotainment system to how the car looks, how the car feels, right down to all the development that's done in cars. It's a very vibrant development area. And at 109 billion, you wonder what we're doing at 24 million. Our customers, it's the who's who list of car companies from around the world. Not just car companies, we also supply to the tier 1 suppliers. So you can see on that list companies like Continental, Hyundai, Mobis. But also you'll start to see companies on there that perhaps we've never heard of before, like FAW and JMC. And these are the Chinese companies that you may have never heard of, but actually when you go to visit them, it turns out they're making more cars than Renault. It's that big. And there are over 100 car companies in China, and we're only just starting to tap into that market. But standing out by quite a large degree is companies like Toyota, Ford and Daimler. And they continue to buy our products. In fact, Toyota have over 70 robot systems and still remains year on year one of our largest customers. So they're always reinventing their products, they're all reinventing the use and why they use the products. And we claim actually the top 20, I could say we're the top 25 automotive companies routinely use our products in their day-to-day testing. I mentioned the split of the business. I mean, it is truly global. And this number will change, flexing back and forwards, but actually the portions you're seeing there are broadly correct. When we talk about Europe, we talk about Germany. When we talk about North America, we're on about Ford and we're on about GM. But in the last few years, there have been new entrants from America. And for the first time, we're now selling technology to the West Coast tech companies as they start to evolve their products and their platforms to maybe take on Detroit and Stuttgart, who knows. China, when we look at places like North America, Europe and Japan, we're really talking about repeat business, selling products to existing customers. When we look at China, it's all new business. And just recently now, we're starting to see the repeat business. So it's truly starting to mature the Chinese market into a genuine automotive powerhouse. And I don't believe they're interested in actually making cars to sell to the rest of the world. My own feeling is they're looking cars that their own populace will buy. Normally, if you're an aspiring Chinese businessman, you'd like to buy the Western derivative. So you'll be the Passat. And in fact, I remember years ago going to a company in China and he said, "Do you think this car looks like a BMW X5? I said, it does. It doesn't drive like one. And he said, well, that's got a minibus underneath, but don't worry about that. But that's changed. The engineers, the quality of the engineers in those parts of the world now are starting to improve. They're starting to understand the tools. They're starting to get better at understanding what their needs are. And this is perfect for us because this is what we're about. We are a solutions provider. We are looking for people to come back to us with challenges. We've always moved our businesses to a high level. We've always gone high end. Proud of that because that's what we do. Because actually, you do this at your peril. If you go cheap with track testing, it normally ends up with a car-shaped hole at the end of the test track. It's important that the data is clean. It's important that the machine works when they get onto the track. Not being able to get on the track and not being able to use the machine is an awful lot of cost. And so we're proud of the attention to detail that we put into this product. And it's the same vigor we're putting into all the new products we're now developing for the next 2, 3, 4 years. The company's transitioned. In fact, it's transitioned in the most amazing way. Way back in the 80s and the 90s, the company was very much a consultancy group. It gave consultancy to the car industry for suspension, noise, vibration, and harshness. But actually, Tony and the team could see that the consultancy was going offshore as the car industry was diminishing. Of late, we have seen that come back. And in fact, they started to move towards investing in new products and services with a mantra that we'll build the machines that we as engineers would like to use. And that first started with the first machine you saw on the slide, which is Myra. And they thought they maybe would sell 1 or 2 of those, about £2 million each. We're now on number 35. And that number continues to increase as we continue to evolve that product. At the AIM IPO, we're about 40 staff, had about 1,000 square meters of site. And today we're about 150. In fact, we've just broken through the 120. And we've moved into a new facility and we've got over 4,000 meters of capability. And in fact, that factory that we started 5 years ago is now too small and we're now looking to move on to a new space. I like to also say that's kind of when I joined. But, so what are the drivers of this business? You know, it is engineering. The global spending on the automotive R&D is growing, especially in Asia. The introduction of new safety systems. Most cars now have moved away from passive safety. Passive safety, I mean airbags, crumple zones, seat belts, to active safety. Your car is starting to make a decision for you. It is actually applying the brakes if you choose not to avoid a collision. It will at one time be able to have lane departure assist. It will steer you into certain areas. And all of this technology is the building blocks of what will become full autonomous one day. But it needs testing, and it needs testing very precisely. Whereas 5, 6 years ago we sold £35,000 robot systems, now we sell £1 million robot systems, complete packages to engineering companies who really want to move their whole testing capability ahead. They're building new test tracks, they're developing new capabilities. Third thing is a great dependency now on computer-aided design. We heard recently that Dyson want to get into the car business. They'll do it a completely different way. They will do it through virtual testing and simulation and computer-aided designs. The models are getting very sophisticated these days. You still have to build a prototype and you still have to go through the cycle, but you don't have to do it as much. And you can make those changes on the computer and you can prove them on the simulator before you go down the expense of the prototyping. But every point of that development cycle, there is a product ABD wants to sell and wants to position in front of the customer. So our investment is very much about new facilities. We have a new facility in Bradford-on-Avon. I think I have a photograph of it later. We're developing new R&D facilities. We're bringing in new people. We realise now that actually you've got to have offline R&D. You can't have your chief software engineer on the phone to Opel talking about a problem in the field. And that has led us now to put development to one side in the company, but actually go out into the market and put support. Japan was the starter. We're now putting support into China, into America, basically to support the customers and our resellers in those regions. And we continue to try and find the high caliber personnel. It's difficult. It's hard to find good engineers. We've gone outside. We've got a very good retention of engineers. In the last 5 years, only 3 people have actually left of their own volition. And we're also building that internal and external capacity to actually move that product development. And in fact, back in September last year, we went out and raised some additional funds. And that funds was all about recapitalising the company to develop new products, new services, and to start to look a bit more seriously at the corporate development of the business and just move the company on to the next step. We've created proper roles, CTO roles. We're growing the software capabilities. We're looking at new models. And I said, the new driverless car technology is going to be key to this. 75% of our business is the driverless, is the robot testing. And that's an area we've got to put a lot more investment in. And in fact, the robots are easily scalable. You can scale those up. It's the big stuff that's difficult, which is why the new factory is so important. It has certain dedicated specialities that allow us to make the machines of the future. And that wasn't available to us in the past. I'm disappointed, actually. I've got a computer-aided picture there because actually I've got a real thing now. And I've actually moved some of my software team into the new factory. But this is how it looked a year ago. And I cannot believe that we're now where we need to be. This has been such a big project between myself and the chairman. But what it means is that these 6 sites that we've spread ourselves around Wiltshire can now come under one roof. And this is a review we have to do now because we don't want to be in the same situation we have ever been of being behind the curve. And we've actually taken a position on land across the way, which will be the next capacity for the next 2, 3, 4 years. I know I rattled through this really quickly because I was told you wanted to ask lots of questions, and I hope that's true.
30% of your revenue to Germany. What do you think the impact of Brexit will be?
There will be an impact on Brexit, and I think what we've done is we will be setting up the German entity quite soon. There doesn't seem to be a huge amount of antipathy towards AB Dynamics. We are kind of a global company. We have German employees. I do get the sense, though, that some of the European programmes are being precluded from. Some of the joint safety programmes, and I think having the German office will put us at the table. We do have a Klaus, which everyone's got to have a Klaus, and he's going to be at the top table. He's well respected in the industry. We're lucky to have him. And already he's starting to walk the corridors of the industry because a lot of work is done behind the scenes. By the time the tender comes out, it's almost a fait accompli. So we're working with people like Kempton University. We're looking at other places we can work like Karlsruhe. And I do believe that when I come back here, or whoever comes back in years to come, we'll be talking about a German office that has actually morphed into a full European office. But it is about support. These machines are getting more complicated. I showed you a picture of a drive-over target. It's hard to give a warranty on something that gets driven over, so it needs support. They want to have engineers there very quickly, and that really is an area of development for us over the next 2 years. So kind of German office, support office, Brexit, I think they kind of come together for us.
If I understand it correctly, you make stuff and sell it. Is there a market to be had for offering these things as a service, having your own testing centre where people can do that, or is it just not what you want to do?
Good question, actually, and that's a question that comes up a lot. Our customers are test houses, so it's sometimes difficult to set yourself up in competition to them. We do lease out products, but a lot of people like to buy these as capital items. The worst thing that can happen if you're having to borrow or use machinery is if you do the test, take the data back, and then think, shit, there's a whole lot of other testing I'd like to have done. Leaving the car on the machine and coming back to it the following day is key. So for those big machines, for example, Toyota have 2 machines. I went in a Higashi Fuji. There was one machine that was used by the R&D group. No one was actually sitting around it, but there was some fancy looking car on there. The other one was being tested to death. When he opened up the garage, it was full of foreign cars. And all they were doing was testing other people's cars. And that's fine, but you obviously want to be able to stop it and do the testing. So the lease model is not attractive, and we've offered it to try and attract business, but most of these things are capital items. The second answer to your question is when we first listed, we were about 6% recurring revenue. Now we're about 10. It will go up, but it won't be like the Rolls-Royce model where you sell the jet engine for nothing and give a servicing package. Customers don't want that. They've bought the product off you, they've paid the money. The Japanese kind of think it's a warranty for life, which is why putting a support centre in Japan is being very useful because they can see the value of the support contracts. So I think we can do more, but I think in terms of repeat business, it's selling more robots, it's selling next systems. They've always got a budget for the next generation of products.
And outside the auto business, is there any market expanding that makes sense for you?
It's one of the reasons I showed that graph with the attractiveness of the automotive R&D is that's quite hard fought. My more senior engineers 20 years ago met the junior engineer in Daimler, and now that junior engineer in Daimler is now a divisional head. And those relationships are top and bottom of the organisation. So companies like Toyota, Daimler, Volvo, and Volkswagen, they're the ones, if you get them, everyone else tends to follow. They're the leaders. And we've got excellent relationships inside those companies. The slight dichotomy of the reseller model is that although my Chinese reseller has put 24 salesmen on the job, we're not getting that kind of relationship. He's selling out the catalogue. And I think if we were to look at the future propagation of the business, it would be by going back out and actually selling the company's real capabilities, which is not products out the catalogue, it's know-how and technology. So
cars forever, no other markets?
Well, there was a time when we looked at, things come along like open cast mining, lots and lots of trucks going around, running it on robots, 50 robots running around, sounds great. We didn't know who the customer was, we were about 3 levels down the organisation, and it was one of 7 projects they were looking at, and we weren't the one that was chosen. So stick to the knitting.
You showed a graph with the trajectory of sales, and you pointed out where you joined the group. And of course, there was an RNS in August saying that you're about to leave the group at the end of 2017. Should we be concerned? And more seriously, what are you looking for in your next role that you didn't feel that you had in this role?
Oh, okay. That's a hell of a question. I've had a lot of those today. So I joined the company 5 years ago, and I think what we did in those 5 years is almost 7 years of business in one go. We've come to a stage of the company's growth where I actually brought in someone to have a look at us and have a good root and branch, talk to the customers, suppliers, talk to the directors of the board, of the PLC, of the engineers. And actually what he came up with was like, you're in a good position, okay, and you should be now looking at the corporate development side more seriously, but here's the structural things you need to sort out. And I looked at it and I said, actually, to be honest, I agree with everything he said, but I'm not the person to do this. I have genuinely run out of my knowledge base. And I think the company is set to fly. And I think what it needs now is someone who's had experience with a business that is 100 million turnover, much larger size, is familiar with the M&A process, because we haven't really put a step wrong. And to blag it now would just be a terrible shame. And there is a personal side to it as well. It's come at quite a personal cost. I'm still married, but I live away from home during the week, and it's just starting to get to me.
But of course, the person who replaces you might come in and blag it.
I have too much of an interest in this company to let it happen. The statement I made back in August is that I'm staying on as MD until the transition is correct. What I can say is that the candidates that are being put forward are of extremely high calibre. I can also tell you that if I was to apply for that job, I wouldn't get it.
Hi, thanks. I see from the sheet we get from Stockopedia that only just over half the shares are in free float. Who are your largest shareholders?
So there's still, Tony Best still owns around about 34, with his wife probably about 34-35%. We've got institutions like BlackRock, Lion Trust, Schroders, used to be Hargreave Hale, but now Canaccord. And there's quite a long and powerful retail part of our business.
Sure, because it says that Tony Best is 76. Is he?
He's 80.
Oh goodness! Well, okay, they're out of date. I mean,
80.
So he's probably isn't. I'm trying to put this politely. He isn't around for the long term, or I don't know. Sorry.
Do you want to speak to him? No. He has been very useful to me in the business. A CEO's role is quite isolated, especially when you come into a new organisation. He stepped away very, very quickly. He was very interested in the build side of it, so he got involved in the building, he read the contracts. He likes the technology still. I like the way he mentors my younger engineers. But in the last 2 years, he's doing less and less, and I've missed that a lot. He said to me, he has divested a lot. He originally had 70%, now he's down to where he is. But he's kind of saying to me, what else could I invest in that would have done this well? And in terms of inheritance planning, IHT relief, he's got a legacy to pass his family. So, no, I'm absolutely happy with where he is. And in fact, most of the investors we go and speak and meet to sort of said, actually, kind of glad you're there, stops him doing stupid things. And he's kind of right.
Tim, you touched on the potential new generation of car manufacturers. Perhaps in the vanguard of that is Tesla.
Yeah.
I didn't notice whether they were on your client slide. Are they one of your clients? And if not, why not?
No, they're not. They tend to put their research out to third parties. So a lot of the chassis dynamic work would have been done by companies that own our machines. So Myra, Millbrook, Idiada, there are companies all around the world that do this.
So they're an indirect client of yours, in effect.
But their speciality is the motor and the batteries. The chassis work, I mean, it's interesting that they've gone and plundered some of the best engineers in the world, and we always had a very good relationship with Ford, and his Ford engineer who kind of gone missing for a couple of years suddenly turned up with a suntan, and he was looking to put a toolkit together. So I don't underestimate what Tesla will do. The biggest issue about these electric cars, I don't know if you've been in them, is with the absence of the engine, they're actually quite noisy. You can hear gravel rattling underneath and the noise of the tyres, and there's a lot of work being done to try and improve the sort of noise, vibration, harshness, and there's several opportunities for us as a company to come in with technology that can make that work.
Do you see yourself moving from the testing before the car goes out for sale into testing as how drivers are driving, and as cars turn into software platforms which can then maybe change the dynamics of how they operate for the drivers? Do you see opportunities to move your software and technology into that sort of data area?
I can. I really can. I mean, it's curious that Tesla do a lot of their testing with their customers, don't they? When the car pulls into the garage at the end of the night, it downloads all the data for the day. And I think customers would be horrified to know how much beta testing has been done on their car. But yes, there's a lot of stuff that we have that is used. And I kind of got a group of people looking at this kind of new stuff.
And sorry, final question. There's a recent employee share incentive,
yes.
And it's great to see the performance you delivered for our shareholders. But can you talk about how that's going to propel future growth and what that's going to enable you to do, and why that's a really positive thing for our shareholders?
Well, giving the company options to the staff. I mean, we deliberately give everyone in the company stock and options. It gives them a bit of investment in the organisation. It's good and bad. I got collared by the cleaner the other day asking me why the shares were a bit low, and that he wanted to buy a new car at Christmas. But I think Tony's sort of instilled on me something about people businesses and actually really meaning people businesses, looking out the window as people come into the car park and saying, these people rely on you, good precious stuff, these people kind of rely on you for their well-being and stuff. And because the company has been profitable, we did feel we could use, rather than just sort of pile money into bonuses all the time, we could use some form of equity-based remuneration scheme through the share options. And the first scheme worked really well, and in fact a lot of that was down to Tony's dilution to create the share options. They've all been exercised now, and I can tell you that about 40% of the staff still hold on to that stock, haven't sold it. And the new options are now coming through. They're not so generous because they had to be done at the more standard rate, but it does seem to instill a sense of belonging. When I disappear off to London, they're a bit more aware that I'm not going on a jolly, that I'm talking to you, gentlemen and ladies. and that it actually means something. So I think it's engagement. So I think if you've got engaged employees, I think you as shareholders would see the benefits of that over the long time. I mean, it was here we put the options in. I'm not saying that's the reason for it, but I see a lot of people doing the extra thing. When we came to year end, we wanted to get stuff out the door for the year end. There was a lot of understanding of why we were doing it. So does that answer the question? Thank you.
I suppose the business has created a lot of revenues over the years through mechanical things, and gradually you're going more and more towards simulation. And so your competitors are maybe different for each part of the business. Are there any, should we be worried about up and coming competitors who are going to come and blindside you on the simulation side?
Yeah, no, I think yes. You should be worried about it. We're worried about it. I mean, we're worried about everything we do. We've always worried about the substitution. The fact the car can drive themselves, why does it need a robot? So we've generated all these black boxes to drive the cars, but they still want robots. We do our best to keep abreast of what's going on in the industry. I mentioned being part of forums is very important for us. We're always having dialogue with customers 2 years before they need the products. So we have an idea about where they are, where they want to do. I think if we hadn't started looking at the more virtual side of the business, we would have been in trouble. It was important for us to understand a bit more about what the customer was doing with the robot and what he's doing with the data. There's much more software stuff coming up out of the company. There's much more products that are more virtual based. The simulator is one of them. It's not the only thing. I mean, there are other parts of our business that will grow very quickly. But yeah, I mean, that's what keeps me awake. Threat of substitution. Someone's going to come up with an app, happy app. It's going to kill my business.
When I last heard your presentation, you talked about how the new factory was going to give you a big boost in income. I guess that is now coming to fruition. How much of a boost is that going to give?
I'm pretty sure I never used those words. I think what I said was that the factory gives us the headway for growth. There wasn't this huge wellhead of pent-up demand that's going to be released when we move into the new factory. The new factory gives us the headway for the next 5 years to continue to grow without restraint, and that's been our issue. So it's for us, it's business as usual. At the back of that factory is a very large machine hall that will let us make new machines, which we've never had before. What I'm hoping that will happen is that having the dynamic of all of the engineers together in one space again, which is a nice, pleasant space to work, would spark this innovation that the company's always had, and maybe we can do more of it.
Thanks. You also said you're 24 million in a $109 billion business.
Yeah.
How are you going to take a bigger piece of that business?
That's up to the new guy.
Any more questions? I've got one if I'm allowed.
One subsidiary after Roger's question, really, is there an assumption that the new factory will take some cost out as well, compared to the disparate nature of your operations in the previous model?
I think over the long term, yes, because that's a product that belongs to us. And there are leases all around the countryside, but they're not horribly expensive. I mean, you can rent a barn for about £15,000 a year, but they will fall away, and it's probably about £120,000 worth of lease that we're having to cover that I think will fall away over the next few years. I don't think it's going to make a massive difference to the bottom line, to be honest. I've never been sitting in a board meeting where we've said we've got too much space. It's always been the other way around. So I can see us hanging on to stuff for quite a long time.
Okay. Another question. You said as part of your, in the presentation, if I quote this right, we're going to have to make more investment into robot technology. Does that mean, are we likely to see an increase in CAPEX generally in R&D as a result over what the traditional run rate has been to date?
Yeah, I mean, we've never been, we've always sort of costed our R&D to expensed it to jobs. For the first time, we're actually showing a definitive R&D line, which we can capitalise, of course. It does enable us to bring our sort of capital gains down to below the 15% mark, but it starts to build up this intangible asset, which worries me. We've always had a tangible asset of product, but we've been advised by by our accountants of what is acceptable. But we should be putting in more fundamental R&D, and yes, we should be expensing that in a way that is prudent without overdoing it.
Is there any guidance out there about what the likely growth in R&D spend is going to be in the next couple of years?
I think there could be guidance when we do our year end in November, because we're kind of shaping up that as a plan now. I mean, next week we enter into the close period, and end of the month is when we're actually going to do our year end, and we are looking at the forecasting and hopefully be able to talk about it with a better narrative. Great.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Tim. Excellent.
Thank you very much.